Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about guild battle and rank each class based on where it could be and should be in a general tier list. I do have a required tier list for this time, and we'll talk about some popular builds for each class, and I'll talk about, I think most classes, just as an overall, could be in the A tier. There are a few classes like Mage which can't, but we'll talk about it. And all right, let's jump into it, and we'll start with Lancer. So Lancer right now is an A class, and I'm debating whether or not to put this class in required. And the reason why is because if you are a Lancer, you can do damage to the crystal, so you can kill, you can play frontline as a gain reducer to the enemy team with stuff like lions and negative pressure and Master Knight's Cry. And you can also remove the enemy field for the entirety of their crystal assault. And there are hardly any guilds in the game that could one-shot the enemy crystal successfully without basically a huge amount of buffs and a field. Most teams will struggle to one-shot without a field. So I'm debating on putting this in required. I think there should be at least one Lancer. I guess that's the way I should look at it, is should there be one of these on the team at any given point? And I believe the answer to that is yes. So I'm going to move Lancer to required, because I think every team should have a way to remove the enemy team's field. And additionally, I think that every team should have some way to jump in as a secondary option and remove additional gain from the opponent. So here's a good example. Both teams start out equally. The enemy team races first, so now your team is in a pinch, and potentially one of your teammates dies. Who do you want to swap into that spot in order to stop the enemies from winning this game? And the top answer would be a ninja or a Lancer. And most of the time, I would go with Lancer if the enemies are swapping in their backline. So for example, most of the time it'll take 5 seconds to swap. That's a normal swap time. Ninjas can do a swap in 1 second. I would rather have my team start swapping to a Lancer first, because when you come in as a Lancer will be the same time that the enemy's backline will start coming in. So I'm going to say that they're required. I think that every team in all of Unison League can benefit from one of these in the 10 roster. They do great damage. They can reduce the enemy's the crystal, so that your entire team does additional ability power damage. They are very consistent with damage. They're excellent at control, and oftentimes top tier guilds will run damage and frontline control Lancers in the same build. So you will start off on the front line, removing the enemy's Unison, and then when you will obtain the buffs to go into Crystal Assault and help to one-shot it. So that is a lot of guilds did that. You know, my guild, Ukyo, we went to GGT, and when we won, we barely won against a team it was a Chinese team that did that exact thing. And the only reason that they didn't win that Unison League match was because Lance Flash at the time was not a dual scaling move. They went back and changed it later, and if they had a dual scaling move at the time, they had double Lancers both doing that, and they would have one-shot our Crystal if, like back then, if the changes were done. So I would say, in my experience, Lancer is required. I think you should have at least one. All right, let's talk about soldiers. Soldiers are in a really weird place. They have a lot of good ability power, uni gain potential on the team. And they also have fierce encouragement, I believe is the ability. It's a buff ability that gives your team one instance of unison gauge reduction ignorance. So when you're in Crystal Assault, they can use this and the entire team can now snipe without the fear of getting unison gauge reduced on. But their damage is not as good as it could be. They also don't bring a lot of other things to guild battle besides just building. And a lot of times I don't even see soldiers in guild battle really anymore for top tier guilds. So I'm going to put soldiers in B tier, specifically because I think their ability to protect their team against one uni reduction is really powerful. But there are other ways to get the exact same effect. You can use a main slot monster and 2 passives that reduce your unison gauge reduction, and you can get 100% unison gauge reduction on everyone on your front line and back line. So I don't think, and then that ability means nothing. So if you kind of remove that ability and expect to use some of the newer options, I would say it's probably not, they don't seem to be in a great spot, I would say. I think it's kind of disappointing. They're not bad though. They're definitely not bad. You can still use them, and they're a pretty good swap in to help gain uni. So like once your team throws uni, then they can swap in. They can use cheer and charisma plus a bunch of like pride as well to gain uni for the entire team. So I do think that they have a lot of potential, but they're definitely not required. And I wouldn't be looking to soldier to save me in a life or death situation. Excuse me. Archers. Archers are kind of in the same boat. They do excellent killing. They're masters of assassination. And they also have a similar ability to Lancers, which applies to your field. And there's a lot of negative fields right now that are really powerful. However, and they do have one of the most powerful abilities in the entire game. I would say it is the single highest damaging ability in the entire game. In Mirage, I believe it's called, it's a gun specific ability that hits 30 times. Or no, 10 times, and it's like attack and magic attack or something like that. It's one of their, but they only have one ability that's like that. It's a really weird PvE ability, but it is really powerful. So the problem that I have with archers is I currently don't see any archers, and I'm definitely not looking to an archer to save me in a pinch because they're just going to die on the front line. I suppose an archer could swap in and start killing people, so that's kind of a benefit. I do think that they're currently underrated. I think most people right now value archers as maybe a C or an F, but I don't think they deserve that, to be honest. I would not feel comfortable putting them in C or F. I don't think they deserve it. I honestly think archers deserve B tier. Because they do have a lot of really unique aspects to them. And I do believe that when 2 guilds clash and things go wrong, which they inevitably do go wrong, there are always situations where you think, maybe we should start killing the enemies because if they start uniing, then we might just lose. And I honestly believe that Archer is an excellent tool to just start popping enemies. So I don't feel comfortable putting them any lower than C just for that alone. But they definitely have more than that. You can swap in and use their division ability to protect your field and allow your team to gain uni. So there are definitely instances where I could see a world where archers are powerful, and I'd put them about on the same level of utility and power as a soldier. All right, now we're going to talk about mages. They are F tier. It's really unfortunate. They have basically nothing. They have no damage for killing, and they have only one ability that's times spellbook, it's TSB, against the crystal, and everything else is garbage. The reason why I think mages are so bad is because they don't have a lot of good options. But I also believe that people are using mages wrong. They have one ability that is really interesting. I don't know if it is good enough to make them C tier. They definitely don't have enough PvP damage to kill people. You can't rely on them to pop enemies. And you also can't rely on them to kill the crystal. If you had a team full of mages, you're going to really struggle to kill the crystal. I also don't believe that they have any strong abilities besides that. They have stuff like Weakened, which can reduce the defense of the crystal when you're in it, like the defense and magic defense, and that's nice. But really, Karma is the only ability that they have that's interesting and makes me think, maybe if the enemy started buffing right before crystal, you could swap in a mage, and then use Karma. And Karma flips your buffs. So if you have plus 180, or let's say that you have an 80% attack, magic defense, magic defense buff. So you're fully buffed from like a really long time ago. Classic buffs. Karma flips that. So now you're negative 80 in everything. With that said, previously, in years past, there have been lots and lots of monsters that give Karma resistance, where if Karma occurs, then you ignore it once. With that said, there has not been a recent monster that I can think of that is any good that has this ability. So, potentially underrated, but also not really, because they don't have great damage and they also can't kill people. So it's a mixed bag. I think that even if you had basically no buffs, if a team had a crest and a field, then a strong team could still one-shot the crystal. So I would rather swap in a Lancer to reduce or to remove the enemy's field than I would to swap in a Mage to apply Karma, and hopefully the enemies don't cleanse that buff, if that makes sense. All right, let's move on to Clerics. Clerics are in a really strange spot because I can understand the idea that they are required. If your team, especially for frontline, if your team gets hit, if you lose the uni race, your team gets hit by a bunch of debuffs, Cleric is one of the only two classes in the game that can save you. Treasure Hunter is the other, but you have to keep in mind, Clerics get tons of buffs to their resistances, just naturally. It's part of their class rings. They have so much resistance, and if you main slot a resistance monster, you can almost avoid everything that comes your way. And essentially what can happen is you can go from 5 people getting hit with stuff like insanity, rejection, sleep, and you can't move. You have to spend a bunch of cost. You can't gain uni. You can't gain cost. You like a bunch of really bad debuffs. A Cleric on your team can fix that entire problem. Clerics can also race. People don't know this, but there is a proc that is a praise proc, I believe. And it came out a couple times as a free proc, so you could get it in an event. And essentially, every time that you use a healing move, you could gain uni. One of the things that really sucks about Treasure Hunter is you have to build a Treasure Hunter in a specific way because you don't want to do damage to the enemies. If you use an ability and you do damage to the enemies, you can give them uni, which will give them uni first if they're also racing. So in order to avoid this, you run really low magic attack, really low attack, and you hope that the enemy defense procs so that you don't do any damage. With Cleric, this is no longer a problem because you're doing no damage. You're only using healing abilities when you're racing. And because of this, you can race really, really quickly and consistently without affecting the opponent in any way. Because let's say that you're a treasure hunter, you attack the enemies, and instead of running a normal defensive proc like Eternity, they're running something like Acoustics, which gives them uni. So even though you're not doing any damage to them directly, by the fact that you're attacking them and they can defense proc, the defense proc could have a uni gain attached to it, which means that they could potentially race faster than you given a cleric where they're not attacking you. Does that make sense? So in that sense, I believe every cleric or every team should have one cleric. I think that's probably a good rule of thumb. So for that reason, I'm putting them in required. But the question is, are they more required than a Lancer? Honestly, probably. If I had to choose between having a Lancer or a Cleric on my team, I'd still probably pick a Cleric because they are so versatile and useful on the front line. Even though you don't get hit with a lot of buffs a lot of the time, just for the fact that you have a Cleric means that you have a backup plan. And I like that style. Some people will disagree. And of course, this is my opinion on class rankings. I do believe that both of them are required, so it's like a nitpicky thing. But they are both very, very good classes. And don't sleep on Cleric, especially in guild battle. That's basically the only place that they shine. All right, let's talk about Rooks. Rooks are so annoying to talk about. And the problem with Rooks is you can't talk about Rooks without talking about ninjas. To put it basically, every team should have a ninja. And because you have a ninja, you have the potential to use an AoE in, I believe it's Wind Slash or something like that. The name of the ability is eluding me right now. It's an AoE ability that hits one time, removes the enemy's unison by 5, and hits the entire enemy field. By the fact that by the fact that Ninja is required and has the potential to one-shot the entire enemy team at the end of something like a Crystal Assault, which I know because I've done this before. So essentially what I'm talking about is one team goes into Crystal, they are attacking the buff, they can't one-shot the Crystal, but they come out of Crystal, and now you have to decide whether or not you're going to instantly jump your uni or you're going to threaten to kill the enemy team. And the ninja will almost always use Wind Shear to attack the enemy team. And just for the fact that you have this threat, you have to jump if you don't have a Rook. And because Ninja is required and is exceptionally powerful, I believe Rooks are A tier. You could argue that just because they have Devoted Sacrifice and they can protect the team from Wind Shear, and they can protect the team right out of something like Unison Clash. So for example, let's say that your entire team jumps, our entire team jumps. If they use something like if both teams survive the uni, if both teams still have members left after the uni, and the enemy team has a Rook and they Devoted Sacrifice, and you don't have a ninja, you're going to have to survive. Sorry about that. You're going to have to survive for, I think, 5 seconds before the devoted sacrifice disappears. And with buffs after uni, the likelihood that your team survives even 2 seconds is close to 0. So devoted sacrifice can be a game-winning move. And that's also part of the reason why ninjas are required, because I might have to put rooks in required because ninjas are so common right now and are so good. You basically need a rook to protect your team, and you also need a ninja to remove devoted sacrifice so that you can one-shot the enemy team. Not to mention that rooks they do pretty decent damage. In fact, I'd say they do double the damage that a mage should do if you have a pure rook build. So they're good in PvP, or good in PvE, really strong in PvE, but unfortunately, there's a bunch of problems with Colosseum's number points, so that's why I devoted them. And in guild battle, I think you could convince me that they're required. I don't know if I should put them in required or not. I feel like every time my team does not have a rook, it limits our abilities greatly. And that is why a lot of teams run a rook. And I guess I would put rook in required because of that. Because you need a rook to deal with the enemy's ninja. And rooks also do some other good things. For example, when you're in Crystal Assault, you can use abilities that rooks have to increase your CP, because there's a chance that your team is low on CP, and CP is most of your health in guild battle. It's probably close to 75 to 80% of your total health, because CP is in the millions, HP is in the hundreds of thousands. So having a class that can heal your team CP while doing damage at the same time, it's like a Cleric, but also incorporates good damage. So yeah, I think, and you can convince me as well. Okay, I swap in let's say that half of our backline swapped in, and then the enemy team started one-shotting our backline. There's a chance that most of us don't get the full buff. So if we still buff and then go into Crystal, you can have a character like Rook that if he survived and got those buffs, he can use something like White Charm to give a lot of the basic buffs to the entire team. Even though he can't give specialty buffs, like for example, if we used Wind Valk and we got the 180 buff, if Rook uses White Charm on teammates that didn't get that 180 buff, they won't get a 180 buff. They'll get an 80% buff. But an 80% buff is better than no buff. He can also give stuff like ability power increases and crit chance increases and stuff like that. They're just not over the limits. It's like the most basic types of of buffs. So yeah, I think you need at least one Rook, and that is a required instance. All right, let's talk about Berserker. Berserker is interesting because there's only one specific build of Berserker that you can run that consistently does good damage to the crystal, and that is the attack and magic attack archer type of Berserker. The problem with this type of Berserker is that you're basically not going to get any Unison. You can't guarantee that you'll get Unison in something like Crystal Assault. So then you have to guarantee that you kill. And if you're not running something like that, the only reason that you're running a Berserker in the first place is to kill the enemies. So the question, I guess, is, should you have a Berserker that can guarantee kill enemies? And the answer to that is extremely difficult because it depends on what strategy you're running. It depends on if you even have enough slots. For example, if you don't have 5 DPS and you need if you don't have like one of your if you don't have one of your frontline characters doubling as a backline character, like a frontline backline lancer that is both controlling the enemy's uni and dealing damage, then there's no instance where you really need a Berserker, because most guild battles will need 5 DPS. You won't be able to run a Rook consistently. You really need to be strong and powerful in order to obtain levels where you can consistently kill the crystal with only 4 or 3 people really doing exceptional damage. And because of that, I don't feel comfortable putting Berserkers above C tier. They were basically not going to be useful for most guilds. However, with that said, there are many instances where Berserker is extremely powerful. If you know beforehand that your enemy team is running a specific strategy, or if you know that there's a specific treasure hunter on the team or a cleric on the team that's going to do something really specific, then you can build a Berserker in advance and use the Berserker to one-shot them and disrupt their plan. And then you have the potential to win that guild battle off of killing people early. And that's really where you would use Berserker, is to kill the enemies, to disrupt their strategy and force them to make on-the-fly decisions, which most teams are not used to. And that is a really powerful strategy. But I think I would rather bring an archer to do that same thing. However, that being said, Berserker is just way better at killing people just in general. You can almost guarantee that you'll kill a treasure hunter with the Berserker. Maybe they do deserve to be in C tier or in B tier. I don't know. They're just not useful, and they're not flexible. Here, I guess I'll keep them in C tier because although there are a bunch of other aspects, their flexibility is basically 0. And the only way that you can have a more flexible Berserker in guild battles is if you run them like I was talking about, where you run an archer build. And technically you could still one-shot really well with that type of build, and you could do crystal damage, but you'd have to guarantee that you one-shot. And I don't like that idea. So I'd rather have other classes than Berserker. All right, Treasure Hunter is required, and they are top tier required. Let's see if I can move these guys around so that I can get Treasure Hunter in first. Okay, well, I guess not. The main reason why Treasure Hunter is absolutely number 1 is because you need them on the front line. That's it. They are the best uni-gain characters in the entire game. Even if you don't run them as your racer, if you run the Cleric as your racer, you need at least 2 Treasure Hunters alongside of them to give them the uni boosts. Increased uni whenever you're using abilities. So I don't really need to talk about Treasure Hunter much more. They are just the class for guild battle. They are absolutely required. Ninja, we talked about Ninja already a little bit. Ninja is required. There are 2 main reasons why Ninja are required. The first one is the 1-second swap. So people don't realize how powerful a 1-second swap can be. I'm going to paint a picture for you. Your entire team is dead except for maybe 1 or 2 people. The enemy team has just fully buffed and is ready to go into Crystal, and they're currently uniing. Right after uni, you have 2 options. You can wait 5 seconds to swap in a character like Lancer, or you can swap in a character like Ninja in 1 second. I can guarantee you that your team will not last 5 seconds unless you have a Rook and they don't have a Ninja. Other than that, there is no instance where you're getting 5 seconds. They're just going to instantly kill your entire enemy team right outside of uni. But if let's say that you had a ninja that died on the front line, even though the ninja's dead, you can still swap in a character like Lancer in 1 second and immediately disable the enemy field. And that is a game-winning move. It has won our guild many guild battles before. Having 1 second swaps is one of the most powerful abilities in the entire game. And it only really exists in guild battles, but it is unbelievably powerful. And normally you'd have, each class would have about 2, here, I guess I'll move these around. I'd put ninja right after, I would put, sorry, let me reorganize. I'd put ninja right after TH. I think most teams should run 2 ninjas. They don't even have to be damaging ninjas. One of them can be, so ninjas overlap with lancers a lot. They have cost reduction, they have uni reduction, they have uni gain reduction, they have blinding, they have resistance value down on their stuff. They have fast AoEs that do massive damage and can one-shot the enemy team. They have dual scaling moves they have 2 dual scaling moves that are pretty good in PvE, so you can go in and kill the crystal. They have, now they have double ether exchange abilities. You can run ether exchange on one side of your set. You can swap to the other side and they get their own cost gaining ability. So you can run double cost gain for them. There's nothing about ninjas that is bad for guild battle. Everything about them screams excellent for guild battle. And the 1 second swap on top, they also have double division. So here's another thing. The reason why archers are not higher value, in my opinion, than I currently put them at, even though they have one of the most powerful abilities in the entire game. If your team gets hit with a negative field where you can't gain uni, swapping in an archer makes a lot of sense, because you're swapping an archer, you use division to remove this ability. Ninjas have that ability as well. Ninjas also have the enemy field disability. So you can disable bad fields on your side and good fields on the enemy side. So they get both the Lancer ability and the Archer ability. The trade-off is that you do not get them for as long. The Lancer ability is like 60 seconds. I believe the Archer is the same. I believe the Archer ability is also 60 seconds. But the Ninja ability is not. It is 20 seconds, I believe, for both. So just be aware of that. It is not as good as the Lancer and Archer abilities. But if the enemy is already uniing and you guys don't have a way to fix your field in 20 seconds, you've probably lost the game anyway. And you're not really looking to uni anymore. You're looking to kill the enemy. So at that point, the 1 second swaps are super important. And here's another thing people don't realize. You can swap in a ninja and then immediately swap them out. And that takes probably 3 seconds to do. Whereas if you do the same, if you just 5 seconds swap a character in, then that takes 5 seconds, regardless. So there's a lot of interesting nuance. You can even, so here's an interesting idea as well. Something that I've seen other guilds do is that they'll have like 3 or 4 treasure hunters at the very beginning. They'll have a cleric. The treasure hunters will use their uni boost. Then they'll immediately swap to a ninja who will start using debuffing abilities on the enemy. And then that ninja will immediately swap into a lancer, and the lancer will use their abilities. And they'll just leave the lancer in, and the ninja will start swapping in some of the other treasure hunters once they're done doing their support, so that the racer can get uni. There's a lot of nuance with ninja. The only bad thing about ninja, this is the number one problem ninja has, is that you should only run one damaging ninja, in my opinion. And the reason is because if you have the ninja as part of your 5 in the back line, if you go into crystal recovery, so this is where you're healing because you all died. Normally, your weapon ability becomes a uni-gain ability and a healing with healing CP as well. Ninjas don't have any weapon abilities. Because they don't have any weapon abilities, similar to Morpher, which we're about to talk about, because they don't have any healing abilities, or they don't have any weapon abilities, they have no abilities that swap. And so now you have a class that will never be able to help you gain CP, which they do have an ability that can gain CP, but given the fact that they have so many other super important abilities, that's basically ignored. But just be aware that there are instances where if you had an extra character that did not have this problem, then it should be noted that ninjas are not good in crystal recovery. That is the only place that they're not good in. And it is unfortunate, but I think it balances them out overall. Definitely does not make them not required. I think you should definitely have at least one ninja. Every team should have one ninja as a backup. When shit hits the fan, you can swap in 1 second and you can recover. All right, let's talk about morphers. Morphers are the odd man out. They are unbelievable when it comes to PvE and horrible when it comes to PvP. So where do they stack up here? So a couple of years ago, Morphers came out, and A-Team is not a great company when it comes to coding. Sometimes they have some silly things that happen. And I remember I was one of the only people who was running Morpher at the time, because at the time you could only play it if you were playing a soldier for most people, because it was a soldier relic exclusive. I think it's the same now, but they probably will open it up soon, because they've opened it up to like guns and other things and axes, which I don't think that was the case originally. Anyway, most people were not running a Morpher, especially for guild battle. And there's an interesting bug, which I believe still exists, because my guess is that A-Team doesn't even know that it exists, because nobody plays Morpher in guild battle. But there's a bug where if you swap in, you morph, and then you swap out. And if you demorph, when you're not in the battle, when you swap back in, you will have all of your morphing abilities available to you, not your unmorphed abilities. Even though your character is unmorphed, you will have your morphed abilities. And this is only in guild battle, specifically because you can swap out of the front line. And I don't think A-Team ever addressed this. And years ago, this actually used to be incredibly powerful because you couldn't one-shot the crystal. No team could one-shot the crystal. They had just increased the crystal HP and other aspects to the crystal. So there was no way that any team could one-shot the crystal. And so every single guild battle would go multiple rounds. And due to this multiple round instance that would happen, Morphers were actually incredibly powerful because now they had the best damage in the entire game for crystals, and you would gain access to tension, and you didn't have to spend any cost on swapping to a morpher, to the morph state, beyond the first time. Because if you timed it properly, you could get it every single time. Now, that's no longer the case. And it is very unfortunate. I believe that morphers are pretty good, but I don't believe that they are much better than Zerkers. They definitely have a place because you will need to kill the crystal. And they have the most powerful ability in the entire game, intention. So you can swap in a morpher, you can morph before you get your before uni goes off, and then your team can throw uni. Then you have good buffs. But right before you go into Crystal Assault, you can use something like Tension, and now you can just absolutely destroy the enemy team. Now, this is just a super unflexible class, and its only purpose is to kill the crystal. But it is exceptional at killing the crystal. And so the question is, where would I put it? I would probably move Soldier and Archer to A and put Morpher in B, because they are incredibly powerful and they're better than Zerkers, in my opinion. You only run Zerkers if you know the enemy strat and you are running a killing strategy. And even most top tier guilds, like our guild and many of the other GGT winner guilds, they react super fast. So as soon as you see a Zerker on the enemy team, you're talking about your second strategy, you're talking about who's swapping in, and hardly ever does the Zerker get to do what they want to do against top tier guilds. And because of that, you can still lose absolutely to a Zerker. I'm just saying that most teams have backup plans, and those backup plans include ninjas and lancers, and the chances, and just straight up killing the enemies. If you want to kill our team, we're just going to swap in backline and kill your team. And because of that, I feel like Zerkers, they are incredibly powerful as like an, I wasn't expecting that, but they are not incredibly good as a consistent strategy because it's so obvious. You just build around it and you run, instead of running 3 treasure hunters, now you run 5 treasure hunters and you run more damage. You swap out the Rook, dump in, like 2 ninjas, something like that. And or you can even run Rook in the front line and then they don't get to kill anything. So there's so much flexibility, especially if you're running a Rook. If you're not running a Rook, I feel like you're going to be at a disadvantage. But there's just too much power that exists in the game, and Zerker is just not enough to overcome that consistently. Whereas I do believe Morpher would have an advantage in almost every situation. If they die, I'm envisioning a situation where you basically have no buffs on your team, but you have a few buffs, like maybe here or there, and you have the Morpher, and the Morpher can help you kill the crystal. Unfortunately, Morphers aren't flexible, so that's why I don't consider them as powerful as Archer or Soldier, because the flexibility isn't there. And Archers and Soldiers don't have as much damage because they don't have tension, but if you don't have any buffs to begin with, tension doesn't really apply. So I think overall, this is good. This is good. Treasure Hunters at the top, Ninjas right after, Cleric, then Lancer, and Rook, all required. And that's basically most teams will have that lineup, or some variation of that lineup. Now I will say for Rook specifically, there's a lot of teams that don't run Rook. And that is a mistake because they're not playing against top tier teams, and top tier teams run ninjas. You have no ninja, or if you have no Rook against a ninja, you lose. And let's see. Soldier, I think everything else looks good. Yeah. Mages getting the shaft, they're basically good at nothing except for killing the crystal, and I would rather have a Morpher for that. And I think Morphers are way better than Berserkers as a consistent mainstay in your team. So yeah, everything looks good. Alrighty. Well, I will catch you guys later, and I will make a monster tier list. I think I will make it just for 44 cost, because 45 cost monsters are just coming out, and there aren't really any top tier ones except for Tino, the one that just had an event for, and you can't get that monster anymore anyway. So, yep. All right, catch you guys later.